Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is a great privilege for me to address you today on behalf of the United Arab Emirates, a nation that has transformed itself into a global beacon of opportunity, innovation, and collaboration. I wish to recognize Nicolas Remeliat, President and CEO of International Economic Forum of the Americas, and Mr. Joe Clark, President of the Toronto Global Forum, for supporting the UAE involvement in this event and highlighting the UAE during this luncheon, which helps to further strengthen the trade and investment relations between Canada and the United Arab Emirates. The UAE's story is a story of a vision, and ambition. From a modest trading outpost, which we have built a dynamic, diversified economy that serves as a gateway to the Middle East, Africa, and Asia and beyond. Strategically located at the crossroads of global trade routes, the UAE connects over 3.2 billion people within a 4-hour flight, with a collective GDP of 60 trillion in emerging markets alone. Our world-class infrastructure, led by Dubai ports, Abu Dhabi ports, airports, and logistic networks, facilitate seamless trade flows and making use of this connection. Our economic vision in the UAE is underpinned by stability, innovation, and openness. The UAE ranks among the top globally for ease of doing business, with streamlined regulations, a business-friendly environment, and a robust legal framework. We have eliminated most barriers for foreign ownerships in many sectors, introducing long-term visa for investors and entrepreneurs, and established free zones that offers 100% foreign ownership, tax exemptions, and full repatriation of profits. These policies have attracted multinational corporations, startups, and investors from all around the world, including many Canadian firms, as well as Canada's major banks. This includes Scotiabank, which opened a branch in Dubai as early as 1978. What a vision. The UAE is committed to innovation and further solidify our position as a global hub. We are a home to cutting-edge initiatives like Dubai's blockchain strategy, Abu Dhabi Masdar City for sustainable technology, and the UAE's ambitious space program, which recently made history with the Emirates Smart Mission. Our investments in artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and fintech are creating new opportunities to collaboration with Canadian businesses renowned for their expertise in these fields. This week, during his visit to the United Arab Emirates, Canada's Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation, the Honourable Evan Solomon, held productive meetings with key UAE officials in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, including the Minister of Economy and the Minister of Artificial Intelligence, and many others. He also, during his visit, signed an MOU with His Excellency Mohammed Hassan Suwaidi, the UAE Minister of Investment, to drive investment and cooperation in data centers and artificial intelligence. Trade between the UAE and Canada is flourishing, with bilateral trade reaching over $3 billion in 2024 and growing steadily. Canadian companies like Bombardier, CNC, Lavalin, and Brookfield have found success in the UAE, while Emirati investments in Canada, particularly in energy, real estate, and technology, continues to expand. A significant milestone in our partnership is the recently concluded FIPA agreement, the Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement, which will be soon signed. This agreement strengthens investor confidence by providing a stable and predictable framework for mutual investment, further solidifying the UAE as a secure destination for Canadian capital, and vice versa. Moreover, the UAE is actively pursuing a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Canada. The CEPA will further reduce trade barriers, streamline customs processes, and open new markets, enabling Canadian businesses to leverage the UAE strategic position as a springboard to high-growth regions like Asia and Africa. Together, the FIPA and the CEPA reflects our shared commitment to fostering economic growth and mutual prosperity. The UAE, vibrant multicultural society where over 200 nationalities peacefully coexist, mirroring Canada's diversity, creating a natural synergy for culture and economic exchange. The UAE is not just a destination for trade and investment, it's a partner in process. We invite Canadian businesses, entrepreneurs, and innovators to join us in shaping a future defined by opportunity, innovation, and mutual prosperity. Together, we can build bridges that span continents, industries, and aspirations. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to engaging with you throughout the luncheon to explore the boundless possibility of our shared journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Excellency, for your warm and informative remarks, for your presence here amongst us at the Toronto Global Forum, and for the UAE's support of this lunch today. And now, my friends, meals will be served, and you will be happy to know that in the joy of our final day together, we're giving you a full 30 minutes to enjoy your food and your conversations. Take every second of it, and I'll be back to interrupt you afterwards. Bon appétit à tous et à toutes. Well, hello, everybody. As promised, I am back to interrupt you. I hope you've all enjoyed your meals. I hope you've also enjoyed your conversation. And I hope that you have enjoyed the fact that we have not made you leave the room for dessert. We brought it to you this time. Enjoy every bite. They are still in the room with us, so once again, could we please thank the staff here at the Royal York for their service. Well, you know that our luncheons are always a forum for really interesting dialogue, and today will be no different. We're in for a great conversation with a respected banking leader and a noted financial journalist. Scott Thomson is the president and CEO of Scotiabank, and Jon Erlichman is a financial commentator and contributor for BNN Bloomberg. And we are going to welcome them now to the stage with great fanfare.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. And Scott, it's great to see you again, and to be here with a lot of wonderful speakers. And we've heard a lot this week about the state of the world, the state of the economy. I'd like to start there. Obviously, bank CEOs get asked this question all the time. What's happening? What's the economic picture look like? As you look at where we are with all these moving parts right now, what's sort of the overarching theme for you?
Yeah, well, first, thanks to the Global Forum for having me, and John, good to see you again. I mean, I think the overall theme is just uncertainty, and we have a new leader and a new approach in Washington that's got a fundamentally different view on how global supply chains should operate, and that is forcing all nations to adjust. And I think now there's a recognition, a realization that this is with us, and probably not only through this administration, but through future administrations. And so I think all countries are reevaluating, how to engage with the U.S. and then also how to make sure they ensure prosperity at home. I think the other thing that's really notable to me is a recognition from all countries that we haven't probably done our best to focus on a growth agenda. And I mean, in Canada, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that, but the last 10 years have been difficult. I think the same could be said for the UK, the same could be said for Europe. And so how do we kind of move that pendulum to a growth-first agenda, which obviously helps the nation state and also helps your engagement with the U.S.
So this idea of a growth-first agenda is something you've been talking about for several months. Can you, I guess from your vantage point, what does that encompass?
Well, if you put yourself now in Canada, I think the last 10 years, we haven't had a growth-first agenda. You've seen the productivity divergence with the U.S., and there's lots of reasons for that, regulation, talent, capabilities, et cetera. But I think the biggest issue we've had is we haven't utilized the resources we have. And when I say resources, I mean natural resources. And so we are world-class in so many areas: uranium, potash, oil and gas, electricity in terms of the grid. And we haven't taken those advantages and utilized them to the extent possible. And so one of the things that I'm really encouraged about with this new government is there's a recognition that we have to do that. And whether it's through Bill C-5, the Major Projects Office, and just the passion and the spirit that they've brought to governing the nation, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're charting a new path here for Canada.
And I guess if you have to think about running your business day to day with all the short-term uncertainties that you spoke about, but embracing kind of this long-term opportunity, how does the economy figure itself out, I guess, along the way within that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Canadian banks have a really big role to play. So if you think about this banking system, and this isn't the Canadian banking system. I think we've got some great industries here in Canada that can play a role. But for the Canadian banks in particular, we managed through the great financial crisis as envy of the world. I took this job on 3 years ago, and one of the first things that happened was the financial dislocation with Silicon Valley Bank in the US, which resulted in some banks going bankrupt and a lot of deposits moving around the system. The Canadian banks were just so strong through that period. We actually saw deposit inflows into our bank, particularly in the international banking part of the business, but also in Canada. And so we should be really proud of the banking system that we have, and that banking system can have a role to play in the Canada Growth First agenda. Since I've become the CEO, we've strengthened the balance sheet significantly. A lot of the Canadian banks have done the same. And we have an opportunity to lean in now to lend money, be advocates for this vision that the Prime Minister has. And we owe it to the country, and we owe it to our clients to do that. And so that's one piece of it. I think the second piece of it, though, and we're not immune from what's going on around us. We all have operations outside of Canada, and we're all fiduciaries to allocate that capital. And so we have to be really thoughtful about how we create returns for our shareholders. And so there's a big onus on the Canadian government and industry here to make sure that competitive playing field between Canada and the US is kept relatively constant so that Canada is a source for capital allocation in the future, and that money doesn't flow towards the US.
When you speak to the clients you work with around the world, though, do you feel like the vision we're seeing from the leadership in this country, that idea of a changing growth agenda, is resonating?
I don't think people recognized how the standing of Canada in the international community had fallen so fast over this last 10 years. And we weren't seen as a place that people wanted to invest because it was just too hard to do business. And there's been a lot said about income taxes and incentives, and I actually think it's more on the regulatory front. It just became too hard to get things done. And so now with this new government coming into place, with some of the initial steps that they have done, I think that is changing the dialogue. But we have to then execute on that and demonstrate that we can get things done. And it's not only for the next 5 years, but for the next 20 years. Because as people make capital allocation decisions, they are making it for a long, long time. And so that we have to build that credibility with the international community.
And in terms of individual examples within that idea of being smarter with growth opportunities, I remember you talked about trade barriers between provinces. We've seen progress made on that front. What are the things you're going to be monitoring to determine whether or not progress is being made?
I mean, I think there's two angles. One, we have to take care of our own home and make sure we do our best to reduce the regulatory burden, get rid of interprovincial trade barriers, make it easy to control our own destiny here. And this concept of economic sovereignty and making sure that we do our best with what we have and what we can control has got to be the first step in that direction. Second, I do think we need to have a dual track policy of both deepening with the US, recognizing that it's 80% of our trade and is not going away, and we've got to make sure that we can, in certain sectors, deepen, but we also need to diversify trade to other countries and other regions where we do have a right to play and a right to win. And again, I come back to resources then, and natural gas is a perfect example where you have one of the biggest deposits in the world in Western Canada at a very price competitive situation, and we should be exporting that to the rest of the world.
And how does Canada navigate that potential opportunity with just the traditional challenges we see when tensions will immediately start to surface when people are talking about new pipelines, et cetera? How do we marry those two things in a productive way?
I mean, you can. In my mind, I'm going to say this, and it sounds easy, but it's not. But the concept of this grand bargain, where you are doing what's right for the country, the world, from a climate perspective and an energy transition perspective, and you're optimizing our resources, and you're diversifying trade, and you're deepening with the US. And as you think about all of that, you can imagine a scenario where you are, you hear the Prime Minister now talking about Keystone again, right? Deepening with the US. You hear the Prime Minister in the Major Projects Office talking about LNG Phase 2. which gets you your gas off of the west coast of Canada. You had a pipeline, Northern Gateway, that was actually fully permitted, fully provisioned, and then got struck down by the federal government. And you have the Pathways Alliance, where you can do carbon capture, all in the context of the Canadian government being more accommodating from a emissions cap, a tanker ban, and a Bill C-69. But this grand bargain of more resources to the US, more resources to Western Canada, or to export it off Western Canada, carbon capture to reduce emissions, and getting sand out of the gears to do things faster and giving the international community the credibility so that they will invest capital. That should be the objective. And I don't think it takes that long. And again, that's why I'm cautiously optimistic that our government now, under Prime Minister Carney, is on the right track.
In your day job, when you're looking at numbers, and you talk a lot about capital allocation, which has been a big prioritization for you as the CEO of Scotiabank, but when people are trying to understand the opportunity, like what can be unlocked with energy in this country and globally, and our natural resources, I mean, how big of an opportunity are we talking about?
Let's just take data centers as an example. Look at the U.S. economy right now is being driven by AI and being driven by the investment in data centers. And as you think about electrification and the need to create sources of power, data centers are going to be a huge part of the future. And you look at how fast the U.S. is moving on data centers, and we're in the U.S., we're the 10th largest foreign bank in the U.S. We are allocating a lot of our capital to doing that. We should be doing the same in Canada. And as you think about Alberta, you've got great natural resources in terms of gas, you've got great renewable opportunities, you've got a country that actually is very tech savvy and innovative, so has the demand for it. And so that should be something that we should be, doubling down on.
So you talked about the fact that you have exposure to the U.S. market. You also have a large presence in Mexico. You've spent some time in Mexico, including with the Prime Minister. I guess my first question would just be, as you have been, part of the dialogue and observing the relationship between Canada and Mexico, how would you describe where things stand right now?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been the CEO for 3 years, and the first year was spent developing the strategy, and the strategy was around connectivity of the bank, and that was Canada, US, Mexico. And I fundamentally believe that that is a strong strategy in the context of the US trying to figure out how to compete with China as an economic superpower. And they're going to need friends, they're going to need allies, they're going to need Mexico, they're going to need Canada. And there's $1.6 trillion of trade flows between Canada, US, Mexico. Now, admittedly, it's 860 between Canada and the US and 860 between Mexico and the US, and not a lot yet between Canada and Mexico. But one of the things that struck me was when I went down